Okay, so now we're going to look at war and empire. This is from chapter 5. And we're going to see how imperial war, British policy, and colonial resistance reshaped relationships between Great Britain, the American colonies, and native nations. So between 1754 and 1774, conflicts over land, power, labor, and taxation transformed local grievances into intercolonial unity, laying the groundwork for a revolution. So our learning objectives are here for this chapter. And let's jump right into it. So between 1754 and 1774, like I said, American colonists experienced war, economic pressure, and political change that transformed how they viewed British authority. This period did not begin with the Revolution, it began with empire. So we have the big French and Indian War, not to be confused with a series of French and Indian Wars. It's very confusing because your book will talk about French and Indian Wars, and then it talks about the French and Indian War, also known as the 7 Years' War, although it was really 9 years. So it's confusing. But we're going to talk about the French and Indian War. Started as a fight for North America, but it very quickly became a global conflict. Native nations, so those indigenous peoples, they were also going to play a critical role using imperial rivalries to protect their land and sovereignty. And here I have this map for you just showing you how global this war is. It's fought on 3 different continents. So it's fought in Europe, in North America, and also in Asia. This part of India has some conflict as well. And that's why we call it like a truly global war, because it's happening spontaneously different parts of the world. So although Britain does win the war, the victory came at a tremendous cost. Debt is going to soar. Administration became more expensive and native claims were ignored. Britain needed revenue and believed the colonies should help pay. So British victory, it encouraged westward expansion. Settlers moved into those native lands, and that's going to spark violent conflict, right? There's Pontiac's War. Pontiac is a native leader, and it revealed how fragile British control truly was. So what they have is the proclamation line, this red line, of 1763 attempted to prevent further violence by restricting settlement west of the Appalachians. So although people had come over into this green area to settle in, they're like, oh, you got to come back. We're going to put this proclamation line, and white colonists can only stay on the eastern side of it. You can't go to the western side of it. Colonists saw it not as a protection, but as a betrayal. But we fought and we thought we were getting all this land. It's like, well, there's native peoples living there. As in true American form, though, we are going to get rid of this proclamation line very quickly, and we're going to spill over into those native lands. But during the meantime, what Britain does is they tighten their control. And for decades, Britain had been practicing what we sometimes refer to as neglect, and I've often seen it also called like benign neglect. So either word you want to use there. But after the war, that neglect ended. They don't just turn a blind eye to what's happening in the colonies. They really start to hone in and focus. So new taxes and enforcement policies are going to follow, and colonists increasingly viewed these changes as violations of long-standing rights. So we're going to see even more resistance. We saw a little bit of resistance in chapter 4 when we talked about political awakenings, and we saw the bread riots and the riot against building the market, like the farmers market. So resistance during this time period, it becomes even more organized, and the Stamp Act really does mark a turning point. Colonists protested openly and collectively. Groups are going to form, boycotts are going to spread, and violence targeted symbols of authority. When the Stamp Act is repealed, colonists celebrated, but Parliament made it clear that it still claimed full authority. So what we see is the Townshend Acts being passed, and the Boston Massacre and the Tea Act and the Intolerable Acts escalated this conflict. And as you read through chapter 5, you're going to get more details about all of these new laws. Anytime you see the word act, A-C-T, in this context, think of it as a law. So the Townshend laws, the Tea law, the Intolerable laws, right? And that's all going to escalate the conflict. And each step push colonies, luckily in this case, closer together. By 1774, resistance was no longer local, it was continental. So it spread all up and down the East Coast and really connected most of the colonies. So although colonists did not begin this period seeking independence, and your book will say that multiple times throughout chapter 5, when they get together and start meeting as a continental congress, and anytime you see the word congress, think of that as a meeting. Anytime they got together to have these meetings, at first it was not about declaring independence. It was like, what can we do to stop these, like what they saw as outrageous laws being passed? Like, how can we stop that? Like, what compromises can we make? How can we closer align ourselves and still be subjects of the king? How can we come into closer relationship with the king and with parliament? It was never about independence. But as we get closer to the end of chapter 5, you'll notice that tone changes. And even though in chapter 6, we'll talk about the Declaration of Independence being written, even though we're talking about independence in 1776, really 1774 and 1775, we're still trying to come back in. We're still trying to be part of the British Empire. So they sought security, fairness, and autonomy, but war and empire really shaped their world in the colonies and colonial expectations. And so by 1774, 1775, that unity had been replaced and resistance had become unavoidable. And by that point, we start to see the path toward revolution. It's very gradual, and it's going to kind of take a few years to really come to that mindset between 1774 and when the Declaration of Independence is sent. It's just our breakup letter. Just because we declare independence does not mean we're independent at that time. We're going to have to fight from like 1775, even before we declare independence. There's going to be conflict and battles going on until 1783, when we actually do get our independence. So chapter 5 is really setting the stage. It's talking about how we are involved in this global conflict and then we're made to pay for it. Colonists are, because I was there, but colonists are made to pay for it. And then how that leads to colonists feeling that they're not being treated as actual Englishmen and as true subjects, and how they want to slowly start to break away from that colonial authority. So chapter 5 really helps set the stage for the revolution before we jump wholeheartedly into it in chapter 6. Make sure as you're going through that you complete the assignments. Both, you've got quiz and discussion in Canvas, and then you also have your Achieve assignments that you need to do for chapters 4 and 5.